So I'll just run through them quickly. So there's the mutuality of obligation, which I mentioned. So these will give you all the points as to what is inside and outside. So next one, as I mentioned, is the control. So who has the control, and it just goes through the how, what, when, and where. So the keys of what's in and out. Next one is the other factors. So as I mentioned, part and parcel. So are you behaving like an employee, being treated like one? Do you run your own business account, financial risk, etc.? So that's your other factors. So those are the 4 areas, as I mentioned, that are really the key areas for you to look and understand, right, am I in or am I out? Then the next one is a really good guide for you, just quickly what helps and hinders. So what helps you stay outside of IR35, and then what hinders you, what is pulling you inside. And then the last slide we were on is the next one. So the evidence. So where are they looking? So they're looking in the contracts, HMRC first of all, and then they are looking at the working practices, but the working practices trumps the contractual agreements. So they will look, how are you working on a day-to-day basis within that workplace to deem whether you are inside or outside. So next slide. So the current rules. So as I said, so the current rules of IR35 are that the contractor, so you guys, if you jump to the next slide, Lauren. So you guys choose as contractors whether you are inside or outside of IR35. So you are making that determination. I'm outside IR35, I am a true contractor, or I'm inside IR35 and I am basically deemed as I hate this word, but a disguised employee. So you're deemed as an employee for tax purposes. So you make that decision until April the 6th. And then finally, after April the 6th, the end client will be making this decision. What that also means is because you were making the decision pre-April in a month's time, you are taking that liability. So if HMRC deems that you have been working for your limited company, paying yourself in dividends, etc., for the however many years, but they deemed actually you should have been inside, it's you that takes the tax risk. They would come after you for the tax and national insurance payments that haven't been paid. However, that is all changing. And the main reason that's changing is because there are too many contractors now that are working outside, that HMRC, rightly or wrongly, believe that a lot of people should be working inside of IR35. They've deemed themselves that actually there's a huge revenue collection here that they can make. They believe it's about £4 billion over the next 2 years that they believe they can actually get back, which, especially with the amount of money we're spending at the minute, and they're looking to try and make more money, you can see why HMRC is so desperate to try and get this through this year. So one question I also get asked a lot of is, will this happen? Well, there's only a month to go. Last year it was cancelled before now. We genuinely believe that it is going to happen this time. If you look at the correspondence from HMRC, they're very strong that it will happen come April. So as I said, current rules, you choose, you take the risk effectively, and you determine yourself. So the next slide should talk about the next, so who now makes the decision? So as I said, you no longer will have that decision process. So you won't be able to choose whether you are inside or outside of IR35. It will be your end client, the person you are carrying the work out for, who deems that process. So they need to assess all of their workers that work through them on a contractual basis and decide, okay, these people are inside, these people are outside. Now we're seeing a lot of determinations in terms of how are they choosing their in and out. But we're also seeing blanket bans. So we are seeing people do it fantastically well, where they are generally using the correct tools to work out whether you are in or outside of IR35. But we are unfortunately seeing these blanket approaches where end clients are just saying you're all inside because we don't want to take the risk, because the risk is now on them. If they deem you outside of IR35, but HMRC deem it inside, then they can potentially run the risk of taking that tax liability. Now, if there is an agency in the chain, because they are the fee payer, they are the person paying you, the limited company, then actually the end client makes the decision, but the agency are the initial ones on the hook for the tax liability. So again, you can see why from an agency point of view, they want this to be done correctly. They want outside workers assessed as such and inside workers to be deemed inside, because they are the ones initially taking the risk. So next slide, Lauren.
Yeah.
Oh, typical. I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. So yeah, and next one. Okay, so we'll go through the legislation. So I did slightly change this now. It will say April 20 on this because this is what I did last year, but it is all the same. But this is no longer draft legislation. This is legislation. So there are the Small Company Exemption Acts. What that means is if you work for a small company, so not yourselves, but you go out and work for a small company, then you will still be able to make that decision. So you might find if you're working for a medium to large company, and the determination for that is 10.2 million turnover, 5.1 million business assets, and 50 employees. So most companies you work for will be in that medium to large, then they will be making that decision. However, if you are lucky enough to work for a small company, then you will still be able to make that determination of whether you're inside or outside, and you will still take the risk. So we also mentioned the fee payer responsibility. So this is a change. And as I mentioned, it's the agency or the end client. So whoever is paying you into your PSC, your limited company right now, they will be the ones who are ultimately taking the risk here and having the liability. So it might be the end client are making the decision, but if the agency are paying you, as I said, they are the ones that can run the risk of having a huge tax bill. There is also an unfortunate part as well, which HMRC are also taking away, which is the 5% allowance. So this allowed you as a contractor, if you were switching from outside to inside, to have a 5% allowance to claim back some of the costs that because closing down a limited company, for instance, I don't recommend you do that, but closing down a limited company costs money. There was this 5% allowance. Unfortunately, you are also losing that as well. So that is going. Next slide. So this is probably the most important slide on here. And it's really important you understand this so you can understand the process and what entitlement you have. So as I said, you no longer have a say in the process in terms of you will be given or should be given a determination. You are inside or you are outside, or if you apply for a new role, it will tell you, okay, this is an inside IR35 role, this is an outside IR35 role. We are starting to see them advertised as such. So the status determination statement is something the end client must provide to the agency and then to you, the worker. And this gives you the determination you are in or you are out. Now, a lot of you may have already had this because there is only a month to go. If you are working for an end client that is organized and has produced these, then you would have already seen one of these determinations to say why you are deemed in or why you are deemed out. And it's important that the end client gives you this. If they do not hand this down the chain and they do not take reasonable care in arriving at this decision, then the liability will sit with the end client. So you should be working for end clients that know what they're doing. They've got a person who understands IR35 within the business making these decisions. It's not someone that doesn't know anything about IR35 just saying, right, you're in or you're out. There needs to be a tool that they're using or knowledge around that. Now, there are tools out there such as CEST, Check Employment Status Tool. This is the HMRC tool. However, it's come in for quite a bit of criticism, understandably so. So I mentioned the substitution clauses and the mutuality of obligation, for instance. Now, HMRC don't ask any mutuality of obligations within the CEST tool, the HMRC tool, because HMRC believe there is always an obligation at work. However, it's not the case, and this is why so many contractors are winning their tribunals against HMRC when they are taken to a tribunal. But the status determination statement is something you really want to understand so you can see how they've arrived at this inside or outside decision. As I said, you no longer have a say in the process in terms of the initial in or out decision. However, there is a dispute process. So there isn't in the public sector, and this happened in the public sector 4 years ago. However, this is something where you have the right now to say, I disagree with my process. I disagree with the decision you have given me. That end client then has 45 days to respond to you. Now, ideally, they will respond to you before the 45 days because that's 7 weeks where you would have been paid either incorrectly or correctly. We don't want that. So we want that process to be sped up as much as possible. But you do have a say now where you can say, I disagree with this decision, and they have to look at it. Now, maybe if they're doing it correctly and they're really going in depth, actually you are just inside on this assignment, but you do have that right to appeal now. Next slide, Lauren. Okay, so how to prepare. So you may have already had your determination, but if you haven't, it's something that you should be asking your end hirer for now, because as I said, there is only a month to go. So you want to understand your options. So as I said, understand IR35, what's in, what's out, understand your role. What are you doing? Are there changes that you can do to show that you are outside of IR35? So start looking for some substitutions if they're out there, for instance, some like-minded colleagues that you could say to each other, would you be my substitute? Also outside IR35, understand what that does mean. So how, as I said, how do you behave? Do you need to change some of your processes? For instance, staff perks is a big one. So if you're on a staff perk box, or you're going to the Christmas parties whenever they happen again, those are the sort of things that are for staff members. They're not for you. So are you eating in the free staff canteen? Again, a staff perk. If you want to be a true contractor, maybe bring your own sandwich in. As I said, insurances, if you're going to be outside as well, make sure you have your own insurances there. So if you don't already, look at the costs of those, and understand your role, as I've already said. So really understand, am I working outside now? Are there changes that I could do to make myself really clearly outside? So when I speak to my end client about this role, I can show them examples so they're more confident to put this role outside for me. However, some of you may be assessed inside of IR35, whether that is through a blanket determination, where they are just unwilling to take the risk at the minute and they want to work compliantly, or you have been assessed because your role is generally business as usual, day-to-day work, then you're inside. Then you need to start looking at your options, such as compliant umbrellas. Understand what your take-home pay is going to be. Speak to your agency. Do they offer a PAYE solution, or is umbrella your only choice? Understand your options and understand what your take-home pay will be come April. Is that enough for you to live on your current lifestyle, or do you need to maybe look to upskill yourself to get outside, or do you need to ask for an uplift? Now, uplift is a very contentious one. Do you need to ask, can I uplift my day rate? Now, you can ask the end clients if you are deemed inside IR35. We are seeing mixed reactions across the board. So some are saying no, some are saying yes, and there's all sorts of percentages that are being uplifted for. Next slide. So I'll run through some frequently asked questions, but that is sort of the end of the presentation. But these are ones that I get all the time, especially from some of the communication and PR world. So what if I work multiple assignments? So as I said at the start, it doesn't matter if you work multiple assignments. You may find that you have 1 or 2 roles inside and then 1 or 2 roles outside. It could be a complete mix of the two because it's on the assignment, not on the individual or the business. Can HMRC go back retrospectively? So there might be some of you sitting there looking at those slides thinking, well, I've been working outside the entire time, but actually I may be that I should have been inside. Well, HMRC have said that they were not looking to go back retrospectively. They are going to look at the new rules and apply those. However, they haven't ruled it out. So it's a little bit uncomfortable. For me, where they've said they're not going to go back retrospectively, but they will not rule it out if there was a clear breach of 35. So I will leave that one up to you. What if you think you're inside now? So as I said, if you think you're inside now, you need to start to understand what your take-home pay is going to be look like. What are your new solutions? Or is there anything you can change to get yourself outside? If inside, what uplift should I be looking at? So as I mentioned, if you are outside IR35 and you're working for your limited company, you will take home more money than you will if you are inside because you are paying more tax to the revenue. So you need to understand what my take home pay will be and then how do I go up. Just to give you a brief idea, if you're on, for instance, £400 a day outside of IR35, you will be losing about £200 a week in physical take home pay per week because you are paying that much more in tax and national insurance. So you need to understand, again, what will my take home be? Can I take roles inside and then outside? So absolutely. If you go from one role in to one role out, that's absolutely fine. And we believe we will see that flip flop between inside and outside. And then, will I earn more going perm? In all honesty, it's up to what the perm contract is. We did see in the public sector quite a few people go permanent, because actually the security of having pensions and holiday pay paid for you, etc., suddenly became more attractive than working as a contractor again. I believe that's it, Lauren.
Great. And then, so someone in our audience, they said they're self-employed working for a company from home, but they're looking to go back into the office from April, May time. She's only working part-time, 24 hours a week, and there is flexibility for overtime hours, and it's just over the tax threshold. Should she be pushing to be employed?
So it's very much case by case basis. Absolutely, this is the time to ask that question. You will find that a lot of end clients actually want to bring you on as a perm. There's a lot of people out there that they're desperate to get in a permanent role, but you've always been happy to work as a contractor. It's just a case of speaking to your end client and saying, what would my permanent equivalent look like? Now, you will find that traditionally your take-home pay will be less, but actually if you're getting paid holidays, non-contributory pensions and things like that, and private medical health care, all the sorts of benefits an employed person gets at those companies, it may be worth going perm. It is a very much a case-by-case situation, but it's definitely worth chatting to the end client, saying, would you take me perm? What would the package look like, perm or contractor, and then making that decision as to what's right for you.
And how far back can HMRC go back retrospectively to query whether you were legitimately working outside IR35?
Yeah, so good question. So as I said before, they've said that they won't retrospectively go back, but they haven't ruled it out. So if I was a contractor, I wouldn't be too comfortable with that statement. They can go back 7 years. So they could go back 7 years throughout your history. Now, once we get past April, remember, they will be assessing end clients. So they will be going and looking at end client contract books as a whole, where they can look at a lot more contractors than just what they're doing at the minute, which is 1-to-1, so one contractor at a time. Now, there's roughly 1.2 million contractors out there, and there's not enough IR35 investigators to go around, which is one of the reasons they've changed to this model, so they can sort of look at more contractors on a whole. So you'd be very, very unfortunate if they were to then retrospectively go back. But if your end client is doing it properly and they are assessing you outside and you are then deemed outside or deemed in, then you should feel comfortable that actually they're looking at the end client, they're not looking at you. But there is always going to be that risk that they can go back and look 7 years.
Okay. And someone in the audience has said, if I am working for a French company, does IR35 still apply to them as me as a limited company working for them?
So if you are working for a company that is abroad, now this is something that HMRC really had to look into, because when this hit in the public sector, there isn't really many that work abroad. If you are working for a French company, but it's coming through, for instance, a UK agency, then IR35 will still apply, because there's still tax being paid to you. So does the right revenue or does the right amount of tax need to be paid? So, for instance, if you're working for a French company that's coming for a UK agency and you are being paid in sterling, then IR35 does still apply here, and it needs to be looked at. And it would be the agency that would then need to make that determination.
And what is the difference in pay rates for contractors working through different solutions, and how will IR35 affect this?
So there's a couple of different solutions. So there's obviously, if you're outside, the majority will work for your limited company or your sole trader account, and you will carry on that way. However, if you're inside, it brings up new solution for you that you need to look at. So umbrella, PAYE agency, and then paying for your limited company, which is one that won't necessarily happen, because the end client has to take all tax and national insurance out, then pay you into your limited company where all the deductions have already been made. Well, it may as well go into your personal bank account. So The biggest difference here is just the difference in take-home pay. So if you're working for your limited company, you're paying yourselves the most tax-efficient way through dividends, etc. If you then move to an umbrella, there is national insurance to pay. Now, not just employers, but not just employees, but employees' national insurance needs to be taken off as well. So your assignment rate should change. So if you're on £400 a day, now ideally there should be an uplift to 13.8% for employees' national insurance. But what we are seeing in the market with some is that the day rate is being reduced. So instead of it being 400 outside, it would be, as an example, £350 inside, because they're then having to uplift for that extra amount of national insurance. So it will change the way that you work.
Okay, great. And how should a firm prepare for this IR35 from a HR compliance perspective? What are the ways around it?
So there are no ways around IR35. How a firm prepares is to assess. So they firstly need to get a realistic figure of how many contractors do they have working for them, and then they need to come up with a structure and a process to how do we look at these workers, how do we assess them inside or outside of IR35, and then pass those decisions down to either the direct contractors or the agencies that provide those workers. It's a really key one, and it's what a lot of end clients are now sort of either scrambling around to do or have already done. It's a real mixed bag. We saw some people make those determinations last year and they've stuck to them, and now we're seeing more and more status determinations come out. But they need to assess their workforce, see how many they've got working. A lot of end clients actually don't realize how many end clients or contractors they actually have in the workplace until they do a real thorough search. And then they need to assess them. And as I've said, there are tools like CEST, the HMRC tool. The problem with that is 19% of times it gives an indeterminate decision. Well, that doesn't help anyone, and you're more than likely going to find that then that role is put inside because an indeterminate isn't worth taking the risk from a compliance point of view. But if they look at companies out there, such as Kudos, then there are protections in place, and they give you a much thorough determination process where it's actually a human looking at it instead of just a checklist. So yeah, they need to come up with a solution. And if they need help, and then there's no one on here, get in contact with me. I've done this for hundreds of companies where they're now assessing their workers correctly, either in or outside of IR35. Those determinations have been given.
Great. And Mel has asked, do substitutes need to be offered even if you are self-employed, not a limited company? How can I, as a freelancer, offer a substitute?
So it's a case of just making sure you've got someone that you could substitute. Now, actually writing them down on a piece of paper, and maybe or in the contract that this would be my substitute, doesn't actually help you. It's just saying that I can deliver a substitute if I need to. And I need to have that right to be able to, if I want to bring in a substitute. You don't have to have a substitute, you don't even have to know anyone, but it would be ideal if you knew someone who sort of did a similar role to you, that is as equally qualified, that could come and do that for you, if you then wanted to exercise that right. But it's not about exercising that right, it's about having the right to be able to do so if you so wish.
Okay. And does working through an umbrella company automatically keep you outside?
So it doesn't keep you outside, it puts you inside, if you like, because you only be working with an umbrella company for two reasons. You are deemed inside of IR35, so you have to pay more tax to HMRC. So we take all of those as an umbrella. So when you get your pay at the end of the week or the month, all deductions have been taken off, so it's your money like an employed person. If, for instance, you are new to contracting, you might not want to set up a limited company. That's very easy to do so. But if you're deemed outside and you're new to it, but you just don't want the hassle of going for a limited company, that's when you would maybe use an umbrella because your pay is all taken care of. But you can take home more money for a limited company. So that's why it's so attractive for contractors.
Okay, great. I think we'll round up there. There have been so many questions that have come through. So thank you all for sending those through. And I've copied them all down so then maybe we can address them in an email later on.
Yep.
I might put my video back on now. But thank you so much, Sean, for your time today. It has been really useful for us all. And also, for anyone in the audience, if you have any future suggestions around our Freelancer Friday events, then it'd be great if you could drop me a line, even if you wanted to be a speaker yourself as well. This session has been recorded and people have asked whether the slides will be shared, and they will be shared after this meeting. So you can share the recording and the slides within your network as well. But thank you so much for now, and thank you again, Sean, and hope you all have a fab weekend.
Thank you.